Hello everyone. More than 2 weeks ago, Russia has renewed its aggression against Ukraine. Russian invaders now target not only the Ukrainian military, but also non-combatants, including unarmed women and children. On the 9th of March, Russian forces bombed a maternity ward in Mariupol, a city that now seems to be completely surrounded by the Russian invaders. A few days ago, the World Health Organization confirmed 18 attacks against the Ukrainian hospitals, ambulances, and health workers. That in addition to the regular and, as we now know, intentional attacks on residential buildings and social infrastructure. The volume of human suffering unleashed by the Russian invaders is really hard to process. The last time Ukraine experienced something like this was in the beginning of the 1940s, during the Nazi invasion. Russian atrocities in Ukraine are not simply war crimes. Now we have a very clear understanding of the ultimate goal of the Kremlin in Ukraine. This is not just the destruction of the Ukrainian state. The ultimate goal is the genocide of the Ukrainian nation. According to the United Nations, genocide means acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, racial, ethnic or religious community as such. The Ukrainian nation is an eyesore to the Putin's regime. Russian elites refer to Ukraine as anti-Russia. What they mean is that Ukraine, being a country culturally similar to Russia, offers a socio-political perspective that is radically different from the backward civilizational worldview of the Kremlin leadership. Ukraine's political project and its liberal modernist drive undermine the very foundations of the Putin regime. Ukraine is anti-Russia in the sense articulated by the Kremlin propagandists. There is Putin, there is Russia. No Putin, no Russia. Now, as Ukrainians renounce Putin, the aim of Moscow is to implement what Putin has been saying for many years. Ukraine does not exist. There is no Ukrainian nation. Now, as a wicked magician, Putin wants to turn his words into reality and to eradicate the Ukrainian nation. It is either his regime and his legacy or Ukraine. Neither can live while the other survives, as J.K. Rowling put it in her fantasy novels. So the Kremlin's plan is as follows. First, to kill as many defenders of Ukraine as possible, to suppress Ukrainians' will to resist. Second, to force other Ukrainians with a strong sense of national identity to leave Ukraine and seek refuge in other countries. Third, to subdue other people remaining in Ukraine and suppress their national self-awareness. And fourth, to repopulate Ukraine with people from Russia, preferably of non-Slavic origin, so they would not have any emotional or historical connection to Ukrainian culture or traditions. That is called genocide, the final solution of the Ukrainian question. Russia is increasingly isolated in the world, while Ukraine enjoys the overwhelming support of the international community. Not only Western governments assist Ukraine in its existential struggle against the genocidal invasion, but also hundreds, thousands or even hundreds of thousands of civil society initiatives, ranging from generous humanitarian assistance to brilliant hacktivist operations. And unlike in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and started the war in eastern Ukraine, the Kremlin has now completely lost the information war. No sane person believes their lies anymore. But it would be a grave mistake to think that Russia will not counterattack in the information space. On the contrary, it is already working to push back against the united international front supporting Ukraine. The current strategy of the Kremlin on the international arena is not to justify the invasion of Ukraine. They will of course continue to shamelessly lie about the genocidal war that they are waging in Ukraine. Russian war criminal Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov even went so far as to say that Russia did not invade Ukraine. But this is not the main strategy, because nobody believes their explanations anyway. The main strategy is to equate Russia with Ukraine, and this strategy has two distinct aspects. First, they need to convince the West that Ukraine is as bad as Russia, and that the West should drop support for Ukraine. The Kremlin disinformation machine now works tirelessly to push this narrative by inventing false stories about Ukrainians planning biological, chemical, nuclear attacks. These disinformation narratives aim at creating an information environment for false flag operations to discredit Ukraine and accuse it of war crimes. The second aspect of the same strategy, promoting the idea that Russia is on a par with Ukraine, is the cynical suggestion that so-called ordinary Russians are victims of this war too. This narrative seeks to convince Western societies that it is ordinary people of both Russia and Ukraine who are suffering from the war that was started by politicians. Naturally, the Kremlin promotes this idea covertly, because its target audience is people critical of the Putin regime. Nevertheless, this narrative seeks to advance Russian foreign policy interests, and it's important to watch who is pushing this idea. In conclusion, it is very important to stress: Russia's renewed aggression against Ukraine is a genocidal war that aims to eradicate the Ukrainian nation, and no citizen of Russia is a victim of this war. None of the Russian soldiers and officers who are killed in Ukraine while committing atrocities and war crimes is a victim of this war. Russian mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, whose sons, husbands, brothers, fathers went to Ukraine to kill and rape and plunder are not victims of this war. The only victims of this genocidal war are Ukrainians, and it is immoral to try and share their victimhood with anyone else. And as for so-called ordinary Russians, let me give you a quote from a message of one Russian friend who recently had to leave Russia because she couldn't stand it anymore. "This is not the future I wanted when I was joining anti-war protests all these years. I never voted for Putin, but I always loved my country, as I always thought that Russia was its people, and people were not Putin. But this monstrous war shed light upon the reality, removed my rose-colored glasses. I thought there were many of us who dreamt of living in a free Russia, but it turned out that we were not only a small group, we were only a few people. The majority of those living in Russia, even if they didn't vote for Putin, don't want to see the reality, don't want to grasp the situation. They keep on living their easy lives, partying, enjoying tasty food, having fun and accusing Europe and America of all the bad things. I left Russia to remain human."